My name is Margaret. I'm 52 years old. And for most of my life, I thought I had built something uncheckable. A marriage of 27 years with my husband Richard, and a family that, at least from the outside, looked like the picture of suburban respectability. Our home was the kind of place people envied, laughter echoing in the hallways, Sunday dinners filled with stories, and neighbors who assumed nothing could ever go wrong behind our polished front door. But here's what nobody ever tells you. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies or even strangers. Sometimes it seeps in quietly from the very people you thought you could trust most. And when it happens, it doesn't just sting. It shatters everything you ever believed about love, family, and loyalty. I always believed my son, Adam, would be the last person to hurt me in such a way. He was my golden boy, the one I raised with values I thought were uncheckable. He was 26, handsome, ambitious, and every bit his father's son, confident to the point of arrogance, but in a way that made him magnetic. When women's eyes followed him in public, I smiled with pride. He had grown into a man who commanded attention. And then there was Rachel, my closest friend for more than a decade. She was my confidant, the one I trusted with my secrets, my fears, my frustrations about aging, even the small, quiet disappointments of marriage. We met when our kids were still in high school, bonded instantly, and became inseparable. Sleepovers for the kids turned into wine nights for us. If something happened in my life, good or bad, Rachel was always the first person I called. I never thought to question her loyalty. She was my sister in everything but blood. The first crack appeared on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. I had just come back from running errands and walked into the living room to find Adam and Rachel sitting a little too close, together on the couch. They weren't touching, not exactly, but the space between them was charged, tense and wrong in a way my gut immediately recognized. They both jumped when I walked in, like teenagers caught sneaking around. Rachel gave a nervous laugh and said something about how Adam had been telling her about a new project at work. Adam excused himself quickly, retreating upstairs, leaving Rachel and me sitting there with an awkward silence hanging between us. I brushed it off at the time. I told myself I was being paranoid. Rachel was my best friend. Adam was my son. There was no way that my instincts could be right. But even as I told myself that, the image of them sitting together lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. That night, when Richard and I went to bed, I considered telling him what I'd seen. But Richard wasn't the type to handle suspicions well. He would have laughed, dismissed it, told me I was overthinking. And maybe I was. So I swallowed it down, convincing myself it was just a trick of perception. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. And once doubt takes root, it grows, twisting everything it touches. The following weeks only made things worse. Rachel started stopping by more often, but always when Richard was at work. And Adam, who had once been distant with my friends, suddenly seemed eager to linger around when she visited. Their laughter would carry through the house, a little too flirtatious, a little too personal. I told myself I was imagining things, but my heart pounded whenever I heard Rachel's voice downstairs while Adam just happened to pass through the kitchen at the same time. Then one evening, I walked into the kitchen and found Rachel washing wine glasses, the same wine glasses Adam and I usually used when we shared a drink after dinner. Except that night, Richard wasn't home. Adam was. She looked up at me, startled, and for just a split second, I saw guilt flash across her face. Adam entered moments later, his shirt untucked, his hair slightly mussed, and the way Rachel glanced at him made my stomach churn. Still, I said nothing. I smiled, forced and brittle, and asked Rachel if she was staying for dinner. She declined, leaving quickly, avoiding my eyes as she hugged me goodbye. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every glance, every laugh, every subtle shift in body language. It all painted a picture I didn't want to see. My son, and my best friend. The betrayal felt too big to name, too monstrous to admit aloud. But something inside me had already broken. I started watching them closely after that, almost obsessively. If Rachel texted me, I checked whether Adam's phone buzzed at the same time. When Rachel came over, I made excuses to stay in the room longer than necessary. I noticed how Adam's eyes lingered on her in ways that weren't innocent, and how Rachel laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm when she didn't need to. Each moment was small, deniable. But together, they created a storm I could no longer ignore. And then the proof came. It was late on a Thursday night. I'd gone downstairs to grab some water when I heard voices drifting from the patio. I slid the curtain just an inch, and what I saw nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. Adam and Rachel sat outside, their chairs close, wine glasses in hand. But it wasn't the wine that made my heart seize. It was the way Rachel leaned in, her hand resting lightly on Adam's thigh. And worse, the way he didn't move it. He leaned closer too, their faces just inches apart, their voices soft and intimate. I dropped the curtain like it burned me, stumbling back into the darkness of the living room. My body trembled, my stomach turned, and my mind screamed in denial. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening, but it was. And from that moment, I knew my life, my marriage, my friendships, even my relationship with my own son would never be the same again. The night I saw Rachel's hand on Adam's thigh, something inside me fractured. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I moved through the following days like a ghost drifting through my own home, haunted by images I couldn't erase. Every time Adam smiled at me, every time Rachel texted asking if I was free for lunch, their faces blurred in my mind, lips too close, hands too familiar, boundaries shattered, but denial is a powerful thing. Part of me clung desperately to the idea that maybe I had misinterpreted what I saw. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe Rachel's hand had slipped. Maybe Adam had been leaning in to hear her better. My mind twisted and bent the truth like soft metal, trying to forge an explanation that didn't leave me gutted. Still, my body knew the truth. My heart raced whenever Adam walked into the room, and a knot of dread tightened in my stomach when Rachel's name lit up my phone. I was living in two worlds at once, the facade of normalcy I presented to my husband, Richard, and the private hell inside my head, where suspicion whispered louder each day. One afternoon, about a week after that patio scene, Rachel stopped by unannounced. Richard was at the office as usual, and Adam had supposedly gone to meet a friend. She breezed into the kitchen with her usual smile, carrying a bottle of red wine. "Surprise girls' night?" she said lightly, setting it on the counter. I forced a smile, though my throat was tight. "I guess so." We poured glasses, sat at the table, and she launched into stories about her job, a coworker's meltdown, a funny client interaction. I tried to listen, but my mind kept circling the same question. Was she lying to my face? Did she know I had seen her and Adam on the patio? At one point, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it quickly, and though she tried to hide it, I caught a flash of Adam's name on the screen. My stomach flipped. "Who's that?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. "Just work," she said, tucking the phone away with a nervous laugh. But I had seen it. Adam, my son. The betrayal burned in my chest like acid. But I stayed quiet. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I needed proof. Real proof. Something undeniable. That night, I made a decision that felt both shameful and necessary. I would check Adam's phone when he came home later, laughing at some joke on his screen. I smiled at him, pretending everything was fine. But as soon as he went to bed, I crept into his room like a thief. my hands shaking as I picked up his phone from the nightstand. Of course, it was locked. I stood there, staring at the black screen, my reflection warped on its surface. What was I doing? What kind of mother sneaks into her son's room to play detective? But the gnawing suspicion was louder than my shame. I tried his birthday. Nothing. I tried the last 4 digits of our house phone number. Nothing. My chest tightened with frustration. Finally, I put it back, tiptoeing out of the room before he stirred. The next morning, Adam was oddly cheerful. Too cheerful. He hummed as he made coffee, cracked jokes at the breakfast table, kissed me on the cheek before heading out. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed everything was perfectly normal. But the more normal he acted, the more convinced I became that he was hiding something, and then the confrontation came sooner than I expected. 2 days later, I returned home early from the grocery store. Richard was at a late meeting, and I assumed Adam wouldn't be home yet. But as I carried bags into the kitchen, I froze. Voices drifted from upstairs. Familiar voices. I set the bags down silently and crept up the staircase, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The voices grew clearer. Adam's low murmur, Rachel's soft laugh. My knees trembled as I reached the hallway. Adam's bedroom door was cracked open, and through that narrow slit, I saw the unthinkable. Rachel sitting cross-legged on his bed, her hand brushing his as they laughed at something on his phone. It wasn't sexual, not yet, but it was intimate. Too intimate. The kind of closeness that didn't belong between a 26-year-old man and his mother's best friend. I pushed the door open. Both their heads snapped up, eyes wide. Rachel's face drained of color. Adam's mouth opened, but no words came out. What is going on here? My voice shook with fury and disbelief. Rachel scrambled to her feet. Margaret, it's not what it looks like. Then tell me what it is. I snapped. Adam stood too, towering over me, his jaw tight. Mom, calm down. You're overreacting. Overreacting? My laugh was bitter, hollow. I walk into my son's room and find my best friend sitting on his bed, and I'm supposed to think that's normal? Rachel held up her hands. We were just talking, I swear. Nothing happened, but her voice wavered, betraying her. Adam stepped closer to me, his eyes hard. You're reading too much into this. You've been acting paranoid for weeks. You need to stop. His words cut deeper than he realized. For years, I had been the one holding this family together, the one smoothing over conflicts, the one making sacrifices no one ever noticed. And now, my own son was gaslighting me, treating me like I was crazy. I turned to Rachel, my chest heaving. Get out of my house. Her eyes filled with tears. Margaret, please. Out. I screamed, my voice raw. She grabbed her purse and fled, brushing past me without another word. Adam glared at me. You didn't have to do that. She's your friend. She was my friend, I spat. Now she's nothing. He shook his head, disbelief on his face. You're making a huge mistake. And with that, he stormed out too, leaving me alone in the silence of his room, my body shaking, my soul hollowed out for the first time in my life. I didn't recognize my son, and worse, I didn't recognize myself either. That night, Richard came home to find me sitting in the dark, the groceries still on the counter, long forgotten. When he asked what was wrong, I opened my mouth to tell him everything, but the words stuck in my throat, because how could I say it? How could I tell my husband that our son was crossing boundaries with my best friend? Instead, I whispered the only truth I could manage. Everything is falling apart, and I knew. Deep in my bones, the storm had only just begun. After the confrontation in Adam's room, nothing in my house felt the same. The walls, once filled with the warmth of family life, now seemed to echo with silence. I found myself moving through the rooms as if they belonged to strangers. Adam avoided me almost completely. If we were in the same room, his eyes would skim past me like I didn't exist. When I asked him simple questions, "What time will you be home?" Or "Did you eat?" he gave clipped one-word answers. The easy bond we'd shared for 26 years had been replaced by a cold, impenetrable wall. Richard noticed. One evening, as I cleared the dinner table, he leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "What's going on with you and Adam?" The question made me freeze, a plate in my hands. I wanted to tell him everything about Rachel, about the way I'd caught them, about the texts and the patio whispers. But shame clamped down on my throat. How could I say the words out loud? How could I tell my husband that the woman he'd invited into our family, the woman I had trusted with every secret, had betrayed us in the worst possible way? So I lied. "He's just stressed from work," I murmured. Richard frowned. Unconvinced, but didn't push further. That night, lying beside him in bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when I had become a stranger in my own life. Rachel, for her part, tried to worm her way back in. The very next morning, I woke to a string of texts from her. "Please, can we talk? I never meant to hurt you. It's not what you think." Every message made my skin crawl. I deleted them without replying. But she didn't stop. She called, left voicemails, even showed up at my doorstep one afternoon, knocking softly, like she thought gentleness would erase the betrayal. I didn't open the door. I stood behind it, fists clenched, listening to her plead through the wood. "Margaret, please. You're my best friend. You know me. You know I would never." I pressed my hand against my chest to steady my heartbeat. The audacity of her words nearly broke me. I wanted to fling the door open and scream at her, demand answers, demand why. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed silent until her footsteps finally retreated down the walkway. Adam, however, wasn't so willing to let her go. Late one night, I crept downstairs for some water and saw the faint glow of the kitchen light. There he was, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low voice I recognized instantly. "Rachel." "Yeah, I know." "No, she's just being paranoid." "I'll figure it out." I froze in the hallway, listening as my own son dismissed me as if I were nothing more than an obstacle in his secret life. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. When he finally hung up, I stepped into the room. "Talking to Rachel?" He jumped, eyes wide, then narrowed. "You're spying on me now?" "I heard you," I said coldly. "How long do you plan on lying to my face?" He set his jaw, defiance flashing in his eyes. "You don't understand. Rachel gets me. She listens." He cut himself off, but the words were already knives in my chest. "I'm your mother," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. "She was my friend, and you're destroying everything." He slammed his hand on the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "Maybe everything needs to be destroyed." The silence that followed was suffocating. He stormed past me, shoulders brushing mine, and stomped upstairs. I stood rooted in place, trembling, his words looping in my head like a cool mantra. Maybe everything needs to be destroyed. The following days blurred into each other. Adam stayed out later and later, sometimes not coming home at all. Richard grew suspicious, asking questions I couldn't answer. And Rachel, Rachel, continued her campaign of apologies, sending me emails, cards, even flowers left on my porch. Each attempt only deepened the wound. One Saturday afternoon, Richard confronted me directly. "Margaret," he said, setting down his coffee cup with unusual force, "I'm not blind. Something's going on with Adam, and with you. Tell me what it is." I swallowed hard, staring at my trembling hands. The truth pressed against my lips, begging to be freed. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. The thought of saying aloud that my son, our son, had crossed a boundary with my best friend felt like tearing open a wound that would never heal. So I deflected again. "He's just..." Lost right now. Maybe it's time he moved out, found his own space. Richard studied me, his eyes sharp, but he didn't argue. That night, I cried in the shower, letting the water muffle my sobs. And then came the moment that shattered whatever fragile hope. I had left out it was a Wednesday evening. I had gone out for groceries, trying to reclaim some normalcy. When I returned, the house was quiet. I carried the bags into the kitchen and froze. On the counter lay a wine glass. Beside it, a lipstick-stained napkin. My stomach dropped. I rushed upstairs, heart pounding, and pushed open Adam's door. The room reeked of perfume I knew all too well. Rachel's perfume. The bed was unmade, the sheets twisted, and though neither of them were there, the evidence screamed louder than any confession could. I staggered back, one hand clutching the doorframe. Tears blurred my vision as the truth finally crystallized. They hadn't just flirted. They hadn't just whispered. They had crossed the line completely. In that moment, something inside me hardened. For weeks, I had been drowning in denial, gaslighting myself into silence. But now, with that perfume still choking the air, there was no room for doubt. My son and my best friend had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable, and I knew what I had to do. No more silence. No more denial. The truth was coming out, and when it did, it would tear everything apart. The night I found Rachel's perfume lingering in Adam's bedroom, I felt like the world had split in two. There was the life I had lived before, and then there was the jagged, unbearable reality after. No more pretending. No more excuses. The evidence was there in front of me, twisted sheets, stained napkins, the unmistakable scent of betrayal. I spent that night pacing the house like a caged animal. Sleep refused to come. My thoughts ran wild, colliding like angry waves. My best friend, my son, together, and all under my roof. By dawn, I knew I couldn't carry this secret alone anymore. I needed Richard to know. Even if it destroyed us, even if it ripped the foundation of our family apart, I couldn't keep lying to him. That evening, after Adam had left the house, I sat Richard down at the kitchen table. My hands trembled as I reached for his. "There's something I need to tell you," I whispered. He frowned, instantly alert. "What is it?" The words caught in my throat. For 27 years, Richard had been my partner in everything. But saying this out loud felt like stepping off a cliff with no bottom. "It's Adam," I began, my voice breaking. "And Rachel." At first, confusion clouded his face. "Rachel? You're Rachel?" I nodded, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I've seen them together, too close, and last night I found proof. She was here, in his room." For a long moment, Richard just stared at me as if waiting for me to laugh and admit it was a sick joke. But when he saw the raw devastation in my eyes, the truth sank in. His face hardened, his jaw tightening, his knuckles white against the table. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, standing abruptly. He paced the kitchen, hands gripping his hair. "Our son? With her? That's—" He couldn't finish the sentence. I sobbed, covering my face with my hands. I didn't want to believe it. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But I can't anymore. Richard stopped pacing, his chest heaving. "How long?" "I don't know," I whispered. "Weeks, maybe months, maybe longer." The silence that followed was deafening. Then suddenly he slammed his fist on the counter, the sound making me flinch. That snake, that woman. In our home, around our family, and Adam, what the hell was wrong with him? His rage frightened me, but underneath it, I recognized the same heartbreak tearing me apart. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting long shadows, waiting for Adam to come home. Every tick of the clock stretched my nerves thinner until I thought they'd snap. When the door finally opened near midnight, Adam stepped in casually, keys jingling like nothing was wrong. But when he saw us sitting there, his smile faltered. What's going on? He asked cautiously. Richard stood. Sit down. His voice was low, deadly calm. Adam hesitated, eyes flicking between us. Then he shrugged and dropped onto the couch, legs sprawled carelessly. What's this about? I swallowed hard, my hands trembling in my lap. We know, I whispered. He frowned. Know what? Rachel, Richard snapped. We know about you and Rachel. Adam's face froze for a split second, just long enough to confirm everything. Then he scoffed, shaking his head. You're blowing things out of proportion. Don't you dare lie to me. Richard thundered, his voice echoing through the house. Your mother found her in your room. We're not idiots. Adam's jaw clenched. So what if she was here? We're both adults. The words hit me like a physical blow. Both adults. As if that excused the grotesque betrayal. She's my best friend, I choked out. Do you understand what you've done to me? To us? To this family? He rolled his eyes, his casual indifference twisting the knife deeper. You're acting like the world's ending? It's not that big of a deal. Richard's face turned red with fury. Not that big of a deal? You're sleeping with your mother's best friend. Under our roof. Do you have any idea how sick that is? Adam stood now, squaring his shoulders. You don't get it. Rachel cares about me. She actually listens, unlike you two. She doesn't treat me like a child. She's old enough to be your mother, I snapped, my voice breaking. And you're old enough to know better, Richard added. But clearly you don't. For a moment, the three of us stood in the living room, the air thick with rage and heartbreak. Then Adam spat the words that would haunt me forever. You're just jealous, Mom. Silence crashed down. My heart stopped. Richard's face went white with shock. Jealous. My own son accused me of being jealous of his affair with my best friend. I couldn't breathe. Tears blurred my vision, my knees threatening to give way. Richard lunged forward, shoving Adam back a step. Get out, he growled. Get out of this house. Right now, Adam glared at him. You can't kick me out. I'm your son. You stopped being my son the moment you betrayed your mother. Richard snarled. The words hung heavy in the air, each one a dagger. Adam's face hardened, but there was a flicker of pain in his eyes. He grabbed his keys, his jacket, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The silence that followed was unbearable. I collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Richard wrapped his arms around me, his own body shaking with rage and grief. For the first time, we were united not in love, but in devastation. The next day, Rachel showed her face. She came to the house while Richard was at work, her expression desperate, her voice pleading. Margaret, please, just listen. I never meant for this to happen. I love you. You're my best friend. But Adam, it just... Stop, I hissed, cutting her off. Don't you dare say his name to me. You don't get to use words like love anymore. You destroyed everything, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to hurt you. You already did, I spat. And now you're nothing to me. Do you understand? Nothing. She reached for me, but I stepped back, my whole body trembling. If you ever come near my family again, I swear, you'll regret it. For once, Rachel had no words. She turned and left, her shoulders slumped, her footsteps heavy as I watched her go. I realized the truth. Nothing would ever repair the fracture she and Adam had caused. My marriage might survive, or it might not. My relationship with my son was in ruins. And the woman I once called my sister was now a stranger I despised. But even in the wreckage, one thing burned clear. I was done being silent. The world needed to know what they had done. And I was ready to set everything on fire. The night Adam stormed out of our house, I thought I had lost him forever. His words, "You're just jealous, Mom," replayed in my head like a curse, poisoning every memory I had of my sweet little boy. I cried until dawn, my body aching from the weight of grief and betrayal. But morning always comes, no matter how much you wish it wouldn't, and with the light of day came a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Adam had made his choice. Rachel had made hers. Now it was time for me to make mine. I wasn't going to be the woman who kept quiet while people trampled all over her life. Not anymore. The first step was telling the truth. I started with my sisters. On the phone, my voice shook as I confessed everything. Adam's closeness with Rachel, the night I caught them, the confrontation with Richard. There was a long silence, then gasps of disbelief. "Margaret, are you serious?" One of them whispered. "As serious as death," I said bitterly. They didn't judge me. They didn't blame me. Instead, they rallied around me. Within days, the story spread through our extended family like wildfire. And while the shame threatened to swallow me whole, a strange sense of relief came with it too. I wasn't carrying the burden alone anymore. Richard, meanwhile, handled it in his own way. He called Rachel's husband, a man named Tom, who had trusted her for 20 years. I'll never forget the sound of his voice as Richard laid it out plain and simple. "Your wife is sleeping with my son." Tom's anguished silence on the other end of the line told me everything. He hadn't known. He hadn't suspected. And now his world was collapsing too. Within a week, Rachel's marriage was in tatters. Tom threw her out of their house, changed the locks, and filed for divorce. Word spread quickly among our friends and neighbors, who had always seen Rachel as the life of the party, the woman who could light up a room. Now they crossed the street to avoid her. Invitations stopped. Her phone calls went unanswered. Rachel's fall was swift and merciless, and Adam, my son, was not spared either. He tried staying at Rachel's apartment, but without Tom's money, she couldn't afford the rent. They moved from place to place, couch surfing, clinging to each other as if the world were against them. But the truth was, they had made themselves outcasts. Friends cut ties. Colleagues whispered behind Adam's back. He lost focus at work, and soon he lost his job altogether. He came back to the house once, weeks later, standing on the porch with hollow eyes. "Mom," he whispered when I opened the door. "Can I come in?" For a moment, my heart leapt. The mother in me wanting to gather him up, forgive him, tell him everything would be okay. But then I remembered Rachel's perfume in his room, his mocking words, his betrayal. I shook my head, tears brimming in my eyes. "Not yet." His face crumbled, but he didn't argue. He just turned and walked away. Watching him go felt like losing him all over again. Richard tried to comfort me. He held me at night, told me we'd get through this together. And slowly, painfully, we began to heal. We went to counseling. We spent more time with our daughters, who became our anchor in the storm. And little by little, laughter returned to our home, fragile at first, like a bird testing its wings, but eventually steady enough to lift us again. Rachel, meanwhile, disappeared from my life completely. I heard she moved to another city, trying to rebuild somewhere no one knew her name. I didn't care. To me, she was dead. Adam. He remained the wound that refused to fully close. Months passed without word from him. Sometimes late at night, I wondered where he was, if he was eating, if he was safe. A mother's love doesn't die, no matter how deep the betrayal. But I also knew I couldn't save him. He had to face the consequences of his choices. One day, almost a year later, I received a letter in the mail. My hand shook as I unfolded it. "Mom," it began, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even forgive myself. What I did with Rachel was wrong. I see that now. It ruined everything. I hurt you, I hurt Dad, I hurt everyone who ever cared about me. I don't know who I am anymore, but I know I want to change. I just hope one day you'll let me come home, even if it's just to sit in the backyard and talk again." Tears blurred the words, but this time they weren't only from pain. They were from hope, Fragile, trembling, but real, I showed the letter to Richard. He read it quietly, then nodded. Maybe he's finally growing up, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself believe it, because here's the truth I've learned through all of this. Betrayal may burn your world to ashes, but from ashes, new things can grow. Stronger things. I may never get back the family I once had. I may never forget the sting of Rachel's betrayal or the sight of my son crossing a line I thought unthinkable. But I survived it. I found my voice again. I reclaimed my dignity, and maybe, just maybe, there's still a future where my son finds his way back, not as the golden boy I once idolized, but as a man who has finally learned what it means to honor the people who love him. Until then, I keep moving forward. One step at a time, one day at a time, because even in the darkest betrayals, the light of truth has a way of guiding us home.